The fields stretch endlessly, but they're quiet. No laughter, no diesel hum, just the wind dragging dust across the same acres that once fed generations. For the first time in modern American history, many farmers are telling their children not to come home. They're not retiring, they're surrendering. Because the math no longer works. In some counties, the average age of a soybean farmer now touches 60, while land prices soar beyond what any successor could ever pay. Tractors worth more than homes. Grain contracts written in fine print that favors no family, and banks that would rather lend to investors than to sons. This isn't a story of drought or storms. It's a story of quiet erosion, not of soil but of legacy. From Illinois to South Dakota, from the heartland to the horizon, 7 states are facing the same impossible question. Who will inherit the land when the heirs no longer want it or can't afford to take it? Prepare yourself, because this is just the beginning. Warren, Illinois. The soil in Illinois still looks perfect, black, deep, and soft enough to hold a seed and a story at the same time. Each spring it breaks open with quiet promise, and each fall it shines gold beneath the combines. From a distance, nothing seems wrong. The fields are wider, the machines newer, the yields higher than ever. Yet behind that beauty, something vital is disappearing. Not the crops, but the families. The state still leads the nation in soybeans, but it no longer leads in hope. Land that once carried a surname now carries a serial number. Auctioneers speak where grandfathers once did. What used to pass through generations now passes through corporations written in ink and interest. In towns like Decatur, Bloomington, and Mattoon, families sit at kitchen tables running calculations that end in surrender. The soil is rich, but the arithmetic is cruel. A generation ago, a farm of 200 acres could support a family. Today, most operators work 10 times that just to survive. Expansion isn't ambition, it's armor. The more acres you run, the more equipment you need, the more debt you carry, the less choice you have. A single broken machine can erase a season's profit. One dry month can unravel a lifetime savings. The land still gives, but it demands an equal measure, and the trade grows harder each year. The elders rarely speak of quitting outright, but their silence tells enough. They look toward their children with gentleness and guilt, and they say things their own fathers never said. Don't come back. Find something easier. These are not words of betrayal, they are words of mercy. They know what waits here, the unpredictable markets, the endless paperwork, the cost of fertilizer, diesel, insurance, and faith. To inherit the farm now is to inherit a fight with no clear victory. Drive the county roads after dark, and you will see the modern face of solitude, a single light moving through miles of black one operator inside a glass cab, guided by GPS, surrounded by hundreds of empty acres. The machine hums, the yield monitor blinks. The harvest goes on, and yet it feels less like life and more like endurance. Technology has replaced neighbors. Efficiency has replaced community. The soil still gives its grain, but not its meaning. In cafes near Springfield, conversations circle the same quiet funerals. Another neighbor sold out. Another son took a job in the city. Another daughter decided not to marry a farmer. There are no arguments, no bitterness, just the shared recognition that the fight is over. The land isn't being lost, it's being bought. At prices no heir can match, by names no one pronounces. Investment funds from the coasts now own fields once measured by hand. They don't visit, they don't plant, they just collect rent and wait for the next rise. One farmer, 65 and weathered, tells me he once dreamed of giving his sons what his father gave him, not wealth, but a place to belong. Now he hopes only that they find peace elsewhere. My father held the land like a prayer, he says. I hold it like a debt notice. Then he looks toward the fields where the sun is sinking through dust and says nothing more. By the time dusk falls, Illinois glows with deceptive perfection. The soybeans ripple like water. The barns throw long shadows, and for a moment it feels eternal, as if nothing could ever change. But prosperity here has learned to deceive. It shines brightest just before it fades. The truth is quieter and heavier. This soil, richer than anywhere in the country, now nourishes balance sheets more than bloodlines. It rewards scale, not stewardship. It favors investors over heirs. And in that silent exchange, something sacred has been spent. The earth remains generous. The families do not. Rich soil, empty future. In Illinois, the harvest continues, but the inheritance has ended. To Iowa. From the sky, Iowa looks eternal. A vast ocean of green that turns to gold in autumn, stretching farther than the eye can follow. The fields shimmer with promise, and the silos stand like silver monuments to abundance. For outsiders, it feels like the heart of American plenty. But to those who live here, that plenty has become unbearable. The harvests grow heavier, the profits grow thinner, and the heirs, they keep walking away. Every season begins with hope and ends with arithmetic. The tractors roar before dawn, the elevators hum until midnight, and still the ledgers never balance. Land that once sold for a few $1,000s an acre now costs more than a lifetime savings. Banks call it appreciation. Families call it exile. Because each new record in value pushes the next generation one step farther from returning home. They can't buy in. They can barely rent. What used to be an inheritance has turned into a locked door. Meanwhile, the yields remain stunning. Iowa feeds the world, but it can no longer feed its own continuity. Every acre produces more, but every operator manages less control. Behind the glossy reports of export and efficiency are men and women who no longer own the ground they till. They lease it from investors, many of whom have never set foot in the Midwest. The rent checks go out on time, the yields go up, but the sense of belonging falls away quietly, like topsoil in the wind. In towns like Boone Newton and Marshalltown, the signs of abundance look the same: new combines, clean bins, long convoys of trucks. Yet if you listen closely, the pride sounds tired. The older farmers talk about their land the way retired soldiers talk about old campaigns. Their faces light up with memory, then dim again when the conversation turns to the future. Their children have good jobs now, good insurance, good weekends, all things that the farm can no longer offer. They visit on holidays, admire the machines, then drive back to Des Moines before dark. The local banks still run radio ads about legacy loans, but everyone knows how few of those are ever approved. The capital is too big, the risk too specific. Lenders prefer large operators who already own thousands of acres. The rest must borrow from family or give up altogether. So they give up not with drama, but with a long sigh that carries through the coffee shops and co-ops each winter. The word succession has become a joke now, something people say with a grin they don't mean. Meanwhile, the weather grows less predictable. A wet spring delays planting and dry July cuts yield a hot September speeds harvest before storage is ready. The old rhythm of the land is turned erratic. Farmers still adapt because they always have, but the fight feels lonelier now. The neighbors are fewer, the nights longer, and the hope thinner. What once felt like freedom now feels like exposure, standing alone under too much sky. In Story County, one man sums it up quietly over coffee. The farm makes money, but it doesn't make life. He looks out the window at the grain trucks lining the road and shrugs. We got everything we ever wanted, except someone to take it. When dusk rolls across the plains, Iowa glows like a promise kept too long. The bins shine, the fields hum with crickets. The air smells of dust and diesel. On the surface, nothing is broken. But beneath the record yields lies a truth too bitter to celebrate. The land is producing more than ever for people who live somewhere else. The silos are full, the houses are empty, and the future stands at the edge of the field looking the other way. Fields full, hearts fallow, that is the new Iowa harvest. 3 Indiana. Indiana doesn't sleep anymore. Its fields hum through the night engines, glowing like embers under the horizon, red and white lights sweeping across the dark like restless eyes. The ground never truly rests. Somewhere always a motor is running. And if it isn't yours, it belongs to the neighbor trying to outlast you. They call it expansion. It feels more like survival on borrowed time. Each year the farms stretch wider, the silos climb higher, and the loans reach deeper. The reports sound proud: record yields, record acreage, record confidence. But when you talk to the farmers behind those records, the pride dissolves fast. They'll tell you quietly they don't remember what it feels like to be still. In the state motion itself has become a form of faith. Because the prices rose, the farms grew. Because the margins thinned, the tractors widened. Because the weather turned uncertain, the insurance bills doubled. Every problem has the same answer: do more, own more, push farther. The logic is mechanical, not human. If you stop, you fail. If you grow, you survive another year. The irony is that growth used to mean success. Now it means exposure. A farm that once covered 500 acres must now cover 1,000 just to stand even. The new combines cost more than the houses their owners live in. The bank loans carry interest rates that sleep heavier than the men who sign them. But no one dares slow down. Slowing down means being left behind, and being left behind is a quiet kind of death. In county offices, the graphs all slope upward, a proud staircase of progress. University reports praise efficiency, output, modernization. The bankers call it resilience. But the people living it call it exhaustion. Each new season demands a bigger machine, a faster pace, a stronger back. There's no pride left in the pace, only habit. One farmer near Shelbyville jokes that he doesn't drive tractors anymore. They drive him. He means it as humor, but his eyes stay fixed on the floor when he says it. By midsummer, the rhythm becomes frantic. The days blur into one long hum of diesel, and calculation acres covered, fuel burned dollars, borrowed debts rolled. Lunch is eaten behind a steering wheel, calls answered between furrows, sleep postponed until the rain comes. When the rain doesn't come, they keep moving anyway. The silence that follows each engine shutdown feels unnatural, almost threatening. Families adjust to the hum like city dwellers adjust to traffic. Sons come home to manage logistics, not to plant. Daughters take over accounting, not harvest. Conversations at dinner turn into meetings, insurance renewals, rent contracts, cash flow. What once was heritage has become operations. They still call it a family farm, but the word family has turned into branding more than reality. By then, expansion has lost all meaning. The fields stretch farther, the balance sheets grow heavier, the stress becomes constant. Some farmers admit they've forgotten how to measure happiness without numbers attached. Acreage equals safety. Yield equals worth. And the emptiness that follows success is something they don't talk about anymore. They just start planning the next purchase, the next plot, the next season. At dusk, the noise fades. The horizon glows orange, the engines cool, and the fields settle into a deceptive calm. For a moment, it feels peaceful until you realize that even the silence vibrates. The hum has sunk into the soil, into the steel, into the people. It's the sound of motion without direction, effort without rest. Indiana doesn't collapse, it accelerates. The engines roar louder, the fields widen, and the horizon keeps pulling away, always just far enough to chase, never close enough to reach. Progress without peace. That's the yield Indiana has learned to live with for Minnesota. Each winter in Minnesota arrives the same way, not with storms, but with surrender. The air turns sharp, the fields turn white, and for a while it looks peaceful. The tractors rest in their sheds, the machines quiet under snow, the sky stretching pale and endless. From the road, it could almost pass for serenity. But underneath that stillness, the soil is holding its breath, and so are the people who live on it. The season hides what the ledgers reveal. Last year, farm incomes collapsed to their lowest point in decades. Soybean yields fell unevenly, and crop insurance only covered part of the wound. For the first time in a generation, even the farms that did everything right could not stay above the frost line of profit. The silence that covers the fields isn't peace, it's defense. Talking about failure has become harder than enduring it. In the cafes of Wilmar and Mankato, the conversations have thinned like the light. Nobody asks how the year went anymore. They already know. They talk about snow depth, about a neighbor's knee surgery, about anything except money. The farmers who once compared yields now compare interest rates, and no one laughs. Even optimism feels expensive here. Each word spoken about the future seems to cost something you can't get back. When the spring catalogs arrive, few people open them. The pictures of new tractors and seed varieties feel almost cruel. Everyone knows what's on offer. No one knows how to pay for it. The equipment dealers call politely at first, then less so. Some farmers don't answer. They've already sharpened the pencil too many times on the same page, calculating how to refinance a year that never really happened. Under the snow, the math waits. Interest on old loans, bills, deferred repairs, postponed insurance still due. The longer the frost holds, the more the numbers tighten, slow and silent as ice on the river. You don't see it crack until it's too late. The farmers know this rhythm too well, the months when everything looks calm and nothing truly is. And yet there's no anger, just fatigue. After so many years of fighting for survival, even worry starts to lose shape. One man outside St. Peter says he doesn't think much about next season anymore. If the ground wakes up, I'll wake up, he says. If not, I'll rest with it. He means it half as a joke, half as prayer. In Minnesota, humor and endurance have long been the same language. For a moment, when the snow begins to melt, the fields look young again. Water runs through the ditches, dark earth peeks out, and for a heartbeat, you can almost imagine recovery. But the thaw only reveals what the cold concealed empty bins, old debts, equipment rusted under tarps. The light returns, but the warmth does not. By April, the silence is back, softer but deeper. A few farmers start engines again, checking batteries, testing hydraulics. The hum feels unfamiliar, like a song forgotten. Some are hopeful, some just stubborn, and some too proud to stop. They move slowly, not because they have energy to spare, but because they fear what will happen when motion ends. The truth is simple. Minnesota has not lost its soil, it has lost its sound. The wind moves, but voices don't. The land still promises, but fewer people believe it. The cold remains the only thing you can count on. And somewhere between endurance and surrender, a thought lingers that faith itself can freeze. Frost over faith. That is what the winters here leave behind. 5 Missouri. It was in Missouri on a wet September night that a father finally told his son, "That's enough, boy. Don't take the farm." The words landed between them like a dropped wrench on concrete, sharp, final, echoing longer than either expected. The boy didn't answer right away. He just looked at his hands raw from the week's work, and then at the man across the table who had taught him how to read the sky, how to smell rain before it came. The old clock ticked once, twice, and the kitchen filled with the kind of silence that only truth can make. Outside, the storm went on without pause. The fields had been too wet to work for days. Mud clung to the tires, to the boots by the door, to everything that used to move. A coffee pot hissed in the corner, and the father's jacket smelled faintly of diesel. He stared into his cup and said softly, "I don't want you to fight what I had to fight." That night, after the word settled, he walked the edge of the property alone. The soybean leaves shimmered under the light from the barn. He thought about the years, 4 decades of planting, fixing, borrowing, and praying for rain, or praying for less of it. The land had given him everything and taken just as much. Each season had left a scar invisible to everyone but him. By morning, his decision felt steady. The farm would be leased to a neighbor with newer machines and younger hands. The son would leave for Kansas City, study something that didn't depend on weather, or diesel, or debt. It wasn't surrender in his mind, it was mercy, disguised as letting go. He wanted the boy to live a life measured in choices, not in acres. In town, people whispered. They said he'd quit too soon, that good land should never leave the bloodline. He smiled, nodded, and changed the subject. They didn't see the electric bills stacked beside the seed invoices, or the loan renewal he hadn't signed yet. Pride can hide a lot, but not forever. On the porch that evening, he told his wife it felt strange to feel lighter. She smiled without surprise. Maybe she said that's what peace sounds like, quiet and unfamiliar. They sat a long while watching the headlights slide across the wet road, the sky still swollen with rain. Still, the next morning hurt. A buyer came to haul away a combine he couldn't afford anymore. The machine coughed once before dying, as if it understood what was happening. He placed a hand on the cold steel, then stepped back. When the truck pulled out, he didn't wave. He just watched the mud pulling at his boots, the sound of chains fading down the road. He told his son later that week, "You don't owe this land anything. It's already taken what it needs." The boy nodded, blinking fast, trying to be strong. They both knew love for the land was never the problem. The problem was that love alone couldn't pay the banker or fix the roof. At sunset, Missouri looked beautiful, painfully so. The fields glowed like gold coins scattered across the hills. He stood there a while, letting the wind move through what used to be his future. Then he turned toward the porch light, faint and warm, where his wife waited. Sometimes mercy dresses itself as defeat, and sometimes walking away is the only way left to stay whole. 6 South Dakota. At first light, South Dakota feels half awake. The frost is gone, but the memory of it lingers in the smell of wet earth. A pickup hums down the gravel road, headlights pale in the mist. The sound is not loud, not hurried, just steady. Someone has started another day. Across the plain, the fields look like parchment washed clean. You can still see last season's stubble, the faint scars of last year's work. But something has shifted. The land isn't exhausted, it's patient. It's waiting for the next hand to touch it. By late spring, the rhythm returns. Men and women who refuse to quit, who stayed through the worst years, begin again with smaller steps and slower pride. They've stopped chasing records. Now they measure progress by balance sheets that actually close by sleep that finally last through the night. Their victories don't make headlines, but they matter. In this soil, resilience has learned humility. A decade ago, most of these families would have tried to expand to buy more acres to outlast the next drought by owning more land. Now, they share equipment through co-ops. They trade labor instead of money. They borrow seeds from neighbors and return them in harvest. What used to be competition has turned quietly into community. Even now, the lessons come slowly. One farmer in Clay County says he no longer worries about what he can't control prices policy, the weather, the river that floods when it wants. He worries about what he can, how to keep his soil alive, how to leave something that can still grow. He calls it stewardship, though he says the word carefully like something fragile. Because they stayed, the land stayed with them. When the wind rolls across the prairie, it carries more than dust. It carries memory. It remembers who listened when everyone else walked away. In the mornings, you can see it, the way the dew clings to the wheat, the way the fence lines straighten after winter. Nothing miraculous, just honest. The banks have softened too. After years of watching foreclosures hollow out the countryside, local lenders began working with smaller operators again. There are new programs now, low-interest loans for regenerative projects, carbon farming incentives, even state bonds for first-generation farmers. It isn't a miracle, but it's movement. And out here, movement means life. By midsummer, the sound of tractors comes back, but it's different now. Slower, lighter. They move like they know the value of rest. People wave from the road again. Kids ride in the cab with their parents. No one's pretending it's easy, but the exhaustion has turned into rhythm. One evening near Brookings, a woman who runs 100 acres looks out at her soybeans and says, "We don't win anymore. We just heal." Her voice isn't bitter. It's calm, almost reverent. The kind of peace that doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to relive it. As the sun sets, the prairie glows gold and pale green. The fields breathe again, quiet and sure. The air carries warmth without warning, the way forgiveness always does. And when the last engine stops, you can almost hear it, the faint pulse beneath the soil, the earth remembering that it still belongs to someone who stayed. The seed still listens. And this time it answers. 7 Nebraska. Now the light in Nebraska feels different. It doesn't strike, it lingers. The sun folds low across the plains, turning the fields to glass and the air to gold. The day doesn't end here. It exhales. And the people who stayed through everything, through drought, debt, and doubt, move slower now, but not because they're tired, because they've learned how to last. After all this time, the land has stopped asking for loyalty. It asks for partnership. A generation ago, families worked because they were told to continue. They did it for legacy, for name, for pride, even as those words grew heavy. Today, those who return do it because they want to, because the soil, for all its weight, still feels honest under their boots. No one is forcing continuity anymore. It's being chosen one field, one morning, one hand at a time. Between dusk and dawn, Nebraska hums with a quieter kind of progress. Drones sweep over cornfields that used to be walked. Soil sensors blink under the surface, reading what once could only be guessed. A single tablet can track irrigation across miles of land. Yet the barns still stand, the same wooden beams, the same initials carved into the door frames 50 years ago. The future here hasn't erased the past, it sits beside it. A young couple outside Kearney planted their first crop this spring. She manages the farm's budget, he manages the software. They laugh when people call them modern farmers. No, she says we're just learning how to listen better. They talk about cover crops, about roots that hold the soil even after harvest. They talk about profit margins, yes, but also about belonging. Their success doesn't glitter. It grows quietly like rain returning to dry ground. For once, nobody's pretending it's easy. The costs are still high. The markets still swing like wind on wire. But there's no despair in it anymore. The fear has cooled into focus. These families aren't chasing expansion or perfection. They're shaping endurance. They measure success and presence in staying and tending and teaching what balance looks like. A man in his 70s says he finally stopped talking about retirement. "I just changed what I call work." He smiles. Used to be fighting the land. Now it's learning from it. He keeps a small patch unplanted each year for prairie grass and wildflowers. He says it reminds him that not everything needs to pay to have value. By late evening, the horizon blurs into a soft orange line. Children ride bikes between bins. A radio hums from the barn. Somewhere a sprinkler turns slow and deliberate, throwing light with every arc. The scene feels complete, not fixed, not perfect, just balanced. The land has finally found its rhythm again, and maybe that's enough. Not prosperity, not redemption, just steadiness. The kind that lets people rest without fear that rest means failure. The camera lingers on a pair of hands, one old, one young, tightening a bolt on a gate side by side. No ceremony, no speech, just the quiet rhythm of work that still matters. Steady hands, open sky. That's what Nebraska has become, not the end of a story, but the piece of one well told. The light fades and the land grows quiet again. The machines rest. The wind carries only dust and breath. Across these 7 states, the story has repeated itself in every form: lost pride, surrender, endurance, renewal. No one was spared, and no one was alone. The truth is, simple hardship hasn't left. Markets will fall again. Drought will return. Families will still face the question of whether to stay or to go. The cycle continues just as it always has. But what's changed is the heart behind it. Because through every collapse, there were hands that kept helping. Neighbors who lent grain and never asked it back. Mothers who balanced books by candlelight. Children who came home not for legacy, but for love. Empathy has turned survival into something shared. And maybe that's what endurance really means, not to win against the odds, but to hold each other steady when the odds return. The horizon remains wide, uncertain, endless. But in the faint hum of life across the plains, there's still one promise that never breaks, that human care is stronger than any storm.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.